My friends, many who come to these classes arrive with a quiet ache in the heart, a disturbance that has grown heavier with time. You have prayed faithfully, you have studied earnestly, you have walked the best you knew how in the light you possessed. You have held on through seasons when every outer sign seemed to declare that your efforts were in vain. And still, after all this faithfulness, the outer picture of your life appears unchanged. The condition persists, the difficulty remains, the relationship still aches, the finances do not shift, and somewhere deep within you rises the painful question, why, after so much seeking, has nothing moved? You may not speak this aloud, for sincere spiritual students often feel they should not admit such discouragement. Yet the question lives within the heart. Is God listening? Have I done something wrong? Why does heaven seem to remain silent? And with this question often comes a sense of fatigue, a sense that perhaps the path is not working, or that one must try harder, push further, pray longer. But I want you to hear this with all the stillness and sincerity of your soul. What you interpret as nothing happening may, in truth, be the very period in which the most sacred work is taking place within your consciousness. For you see, spiritual progress does not begin with outward improvement. It does not start with changed conditions, altered bodies, or rearranged circumstances. Spiritual unfoldment begins where the world cannot see within the depths of your awareness, where the divine presence is quietly but powerfully breaking through layers of fear, doubt, and separation. And it is often in the very moments when your outer life appears motionless that the inner life is being most deeply transformed. The world judges progress by results. Spirit measures progress by receptivity. You have not been abandoned. You have not failed. You have not been overlooked by God. You are, in truth, standing at the threshold of one of the most important revelations a spiritual seeker can receive. That transformation begins within consciousness long before it is witnessed in form. This period of seeming stillness is not a punishment, nor a sign of divine neglect. It is the quiet preparation of the soul being ready to behold what has always been true, that the kingdom of heaven is not a distant reward, but the very essence of your being, awaiting recognition. And so, as we move forward in this class, let us set aside the notion that your faithfulness has been wasted. Let us release the idea that results must appear according to the calendar of human expectation. Instead, let us gently open ourselves to the possibility that God has been working all along, but in a realm deeper than appearances, guiding you from within, preparing you for a transformation that does not begin in the outer world, but in the secret place of your own consciousness. Now let us look together at the very root of the discouragement that so many earnest seekers experience, for there is a misunderstanding, subtle, almost invisible, that lies beneath the sense of disappointment on the spiritual path. Most of us have been conditioned to associate faithfulness with reward, devotion with results, prayer with the expectation of change in the outer world. We have been taught, often unconsciously, to treat God as a kind of celestial responder, one who rearranges the circumstances of human life in response to our spiritual effort. And when those outward circumstances remain unchanged, the mind immediately concludes that something has gone wrong. Either God has withheld the answer, or we have somehow failed to meet the requirements that would unlock divine favor. But, my friends, this very assumption that spiritual practice is meant to produce outward improvement is the source of endless frustration. because it places the entire spiritual journey upon a false foundation. Joel Goldsmith taught again and again that God is not a power acting upon matter. God is not a force brought in from the outside to adjust human conditions. God does not enter the picture of our lives to fix, repair, or improve it. The belief that prayer changes external conditions belongs to the world of duality, the world of two powers, where God is one and the problem is another. But in the consciousness of truth, there are not two powers. There is only the infinite, invisible presence expressing itself, and because of this, the work of God does not begin in the outer realm of forms, bodies, finances, or relationships. It begins within your own consciousness, in the transformation of your awareness, in the dissolving of fear, in the recognition of oneness, in the quiet realization that nothing stands apart from the divine presence. When you understand this, and you begin to see why your faithfulness may seem to bear no visible fruit, it is not that your prayer was ignored, it is that your prayer was misunderstood. You were speaking to a God outside yourself, while the real activity of spirit was occurring within yourself. You were hoping for conditions to change, while spirit was changing you. You were waiting for signs in the outer world, while the true sign, the stillness, the peace, the loosening of fear was arising quietly in the inner sanctuary of your soul. And so, this misunderstanding that God's work is measured by outward improvement becomes the great thief of peace, for it blinds us to the subtle but powerful movement of the Spirit within. My friends, hear this in the silence of your heart. God is not preparing to alter your life. God is preparing you to behold life as it truly is. And when this inner shift takes place, outward harmony appears naturally, not as a divine reward, not as the result of spiritual effort, but as the reflection of a consciousness that has awakened to its own source. Until this is seen, the seeker remains trapped in expectation and disappointment. But once the misunderstanding dissolves, you stand free to experience the spiritual life as it actually unfolds quietly, inwardly, and always from the center outwards. Let us now enter more deeply into the heart of this path. For if you can truly grasp what I am about to say, you will never again measure your spiritual progress by the shifting sands of external conditions. The Spirit of God does not announce its activity with noise or spectacle. Its work is not broadcast on the screen of human events. Rather, the activity of truth begins in the silence, beneath the surface, in the invisible chambers of your own consciousness. And because of this, much of the greatest spiritual transformation in your life will appear to the outer world as though nothing at all is happening. Yet within, the roots are spreading, the soil is being softened, and something profound is taking shape that cannot be seen with the eyes of flesh. Goldsmith constantly reminded us that all spiritual demonstration begins as an inner awareness, long before it appears as an outer form. The world sees events, spirit sees consciousness. My friends, consider the seed. When planted in the ground, it gives no sign of life. Days and weeks may pass, and the surface of the soil remains unchanged, silent, unmoved. The impatient observer might assume the seed has failed. But beneath the soil, in darkness and hidden work, life is stirring, expanding, preparing for its moment of expression. So it is with your spiritual life. What you call silence, Spirit calls preparation. What you call stagnation, Spirit calls foundation. And it is in these quiet, invisible periods that some of the deepest transformations are occurring transformations in how you perceive God, how you perceive yourself, how you perceive the very nature of reality. You may not yet feel joy, yet the roots of peace are taking hold. You may not yet feel clarity, yet confusion is loosening its grip. You may not yet see supply, yet the old fear of lack is dissolving. You may not yet experience harmony, yet the belief in separation is weakening within you. The external picture may not have changed, but you are changing, and this inner shift is the only true measure of spiritual progress. For once your consciousness is transformed, the outer world has no choice but to reflect the change. Spirit works from within to without, never from without to within. This is why Goldsmith taught that the first and greatest evidence of spiritual growth is not physical healing, financial improvement, or relational harmony. The first evidence is the dawning recognition of peace, a peace that arises for no reason, a peace that is not dependent on any circumstance. This peace is the whisper of the kingdom within, gently making itself known. When it appears, even for a moment, know that the invisible work is well underway. So I say to you, do not judge your growth by the absence of outer results. Judge it by the presence of even the smallest inner shift, one breath of stillness, one moment of recognition, one instant in which you sense, however faintly, that God is closer than thought, nearer than emotion, more real than any appearance. These are the signs of transformation. They are subtle, but they are everything. And if you will honor these moments, rather than dismiss them as too small, you will discover that the invisible work of consciousness is the very foundation upon which all visible demonstration must eventually rest. Now, let us look squarely at the question that weighs upon so many hearts. If Spirit is working within me, if the seeds have been planted and the inner roots are forming, then why do the circumstances of my life appear unchanged? Why does the illness remain? Why do the bills still accumulate? Why does the relationship not heal? My friends, this is one of the profound teachings of the spiritual life, and unless it is understood, the seeker will continually slip into disappointment and confusion. The reason the outer picture often remains the same is that the outer picture is not the cause of your experience, it is the effect. It is the shadow cast by the light or darkness of consciousness. To focus on changing the shadow is to engage in futility. It is like trying to straighten the reflection in the mirror without touching the object that casts it. When consciousness is the cause and the world is its reflection, all true change must occur at the level of consciousness first, and only then can the reflection take on a new form. Joel Goldsmith taught that the physical, financial, and relational conditions we experience are appearances, mental pictures displayed on the screen of human sense. They have no power of their own. They cannot act. They cannot know. They cannot sustain themselves. And they certainly cannot prevent the activity of truth from expressing itself. But these pictures do serve a purpose. They reveal to us where our consciousness is still clouded by fear, separation, or false belief. Until those inner clouds dissolve, the picture will continue to repeat itself, not as punishment, but as a mirror faithfully reflecting what remains unresolved within. When the condition persists, it is not because God has withheld healing or supply or harmony. It is because the consciousness that must behold these spiritual realities is still in the process of awakening. Imagine a room in which the blinds are drawn tightly shut outside. The sun shines in full radiance, bathing the world in light. But inside the room, darkness persists. Does the darkness mean the sun has failed to shine? No, it means only that the blinds have not yet been opened. So it is with the life of spirit, the healing, the supply, the harmony, the love. They are already fully present, shining eternally. But if fear, doubt, or separation remain active within consciousness, the blinds are drawn and the light cannot yet be seen in visible form. As these inner barriers dissolve through practice, meditation, and quiet recognition, the blinds gradually open and the outer world begins to brighten. But the room does not become full of light until the blinds are fully released. This is why you may see no change in the outer picture, even while profound work is taking place within. The inner clouds may still be thinning, the inner blinds still loosening. Consciousness is being transformed, but the reflection has not yet caught up. And, my friends, this is not failure. It is evidence of the integrity of spiritual law. If outer conditions could change without a corresponding transformation in consciousness, your life would be unstable, your peace inconsistent, your supply insecure. Spirit waits not because it is slow, but because it works only through awakened consciousness, not around it. When consciousness is ready, the outer form must change. It is inevitable. It is law. Therefore, when things appear unchanged, do not despair. Do not conclude that your practice is ineffective. Do not imagine that God has forgotten you. Instead, understand that the deeper work is still unfolding, that the roots are still strengthening, that the light is still rising behind the blinds, and when the moment of inner readiness is reached, the outer world will reflect it with effortless certainty. Until then, remain faithful not to the expectation of results, but to the recognition of the presence that is forever complete, forever within, forever the true substance of your being. Now, my friends, let us consider one of the most tender and easily misunderstood aspects of the spiritual path, the blessing. Yes, the blessing of delayed demonstration to the human mind. Delay feels like abandonment. It feels like punishment, like unanswered prayer, like divine silence. But in the consciousness of truth, delay is often the very evidence that spirit is working at a depth that could not be reached in any other way. For when the outer demonstration comes too quickly, before the inner groundwork is established, the blessing cannot be held. It slips through the fingers as rapidly as it arrived, because the consciousness required to sustain it has not been formed, and so spirit, in infinite wisdom and love, withholds visible transformation until the unseen foundation is truly secure. We must remember that spiritual demonstration is never an act of magic. It is the natural outflow of awakened consciousness. When healing appears, it is not because God suddenly intervened, but because the fear that obscured wholeness dissolved. When supply appears, it is not because God suddenly provided, but because the sense of limitation that blocked the flow has been released. When harmony in relationship appears, it is because the inner recognition of oneness replaced the belief in separation. The delay, therefore, is the period in which these false beliefs are quietly loosening their grip. It is the sacred time in which spirit prepares the consciousness to behold the truth when it appears, rather than revert to old patterns the moment difficulty arises. And so, what feels like delay is often protection. Spirit does not thrust upon you an outer condition that your present consciousness cannot yet sustain. Spirit does not bring forth demonstration while your dependence is still upon the external picture rather than the inner presence. Spirit waits lovingly, patiently, until the transformation is complete enough that the outer form can come as a reflection, not as a crutch. This waiting is not inactivity, it is the slow, steady dissolving of fear, the purification of motive, the calming of anxious desire, the deepening of trust. These are not small things. These are the very building blocks of spiritual maturity. Without them, any temporary improvement would soon collapse under the weight of old patterns. And this period of delay accomplishes something else as well. It shifts your allegiance. In the beginning, you practice spirituality for results. You meditate for healing. You pray for supply. You read and study for relief. But in the silence of delay, something holy occurs. You discover that the true gift of the spiritual life is not the demonstration itself, but the presence you discover in the midst of waiting. You find that peace does not come from conditions improving, but from resting in God despite conditions. You find that joy does not depend on outcomes, but on awareness. You find that the inner kingdom is far richer than any outer blessing you once sought. And when this shift takes place, the delay ceases to be painful. It becomes sacred. It becomes a time of profound inner reshaping. So I say to you gently, the delay is not a sign that God is holding something back. It is a sign that God is giving you something far greater than the outer demonstration you await. God is giving you the consciousness capable of living free, secure, and anchored in spirit. God is giving you the capacity to receive without fear, to enjoy without clinging, to live without desperation, and when that consciousness is ready, the outer form will come not as a rescue, not as a reward, but as a natural and effortless expression of the kingdom that has already awakened within you. And so we arrive, my friends, at a deeply practical question. How do we maintain inner faithfulness when outward appearances refuse to shift? How do we continue the spiritual life when the world offers no encouragement, no signs, no visible progress? This is where the mature student of truth separates from the one who relies upon outer validation. For in the early stages of the spiritual journey, we practice as long as results appear, but when circumstances remain stubbornly unchanged, many lose heart. They conclude that their practice is ineffective, that they must start again from the beginning, or worse, that Spirit has withdrawn its grace. But the sincere student soon learns that this period where nothing seems to move is not the time to retreat. It is the time to deepen. It is the time to rest more fully in the invisible activity of God, trusting that what is unseen is far more real than what is seen. Joel Goldsmith gave us 4 practices to sustain consciousness during such times, and if you will take these into your heart, they will carry you through seasons in which every outer sign seems contrary to truth. The first is the practice of the presence. This is not effort, nor is it a technique. It is a simple, quiet acknowledgement throughout the day. The kingdom of heaven is within me now, with no request, with no expectation, with no desire to change anything. You pause, whether for 3 seconds or 3 minutes, and remember that God is the life of your being. This recognition, repeated often and gently, keeps you anchored in the truth that your good is not coming from the world, but from within your own consciousness. The second practice is what Goldsmith called divine indifference. Now, this does not mean apathy or coldness. Rather, it means that you no longer permit external appearances to dictate your inner state. When a troubling condition arises, you meet it with practical wisdom, but inwardly you remain unmoved. For you know that the appearance is not power. You acknowledge it on the human level, but refuse to grant it spiritual authority. You do not deny the appearance. You simply place it in its proper context as a shadow without substance, incapable of altering the reality of God's presence in your life. This posture of divine indifference protects your consciousness from collapsing into fear or reaction, even while you address the situation responsibly. The third practice is recognition instead of petition. Most people pray by asking for healing, for supply, for guidance, but asking reinforces separation, for it assumes that God has something you lack. Recognition, on the other hand, is the silent knowing that all that God is, you already are. For God expresses itself as your very being, and so instead of praying for health, you recognize the divine wholeness that has never been touched by disease. Instead of praying for supply, you recognize the infinite nature of spiritual substance. Instead of praying for harmony, you recognize the oneness that exists at the level of spirit. This shift from asking to acknowledging is one of the greatest turning points in the spiritual journey. The fourth practice is the profound and often overlooked discipline of stillness. Before reacting, when fear arises, when a letter comes in the mail that startles you, when a medical report threatens your peace, when a conflict erupts, your first impulse will be to act, to fix, to resist. But the spiritual seeker learns to pause. Even for a few seconds, you become still and let the human mind fall silent. You do not consult the mind for answers. You turn within. Father, what is the truth here? And in that brief opening, the presence reveals something the mind could never find. A calmness enters, a clarity emerges. Solutions come without strain. This stillness is not inactivity, it is the invitation for truth to go before you. And so, my friends, these four practices, practice of the presence, divine indifference, recognition rather than petition, and stillness before reacting, are the tools by which you remain faithful not to appearances but to reality. They sustain you when results are not yet visible. They nourish the inner work that must precede outer change. They remove the desperation from your seeking and replace it with quiet confidence in the invisible action of spirit. They allow you to live the spiritual life not as a means to an end, but as a natural expression of who you truly are. When outward conditions do not change, these practices keep your consciousness aligned with the only thing that truly matters, the awareness of God within. Let me now share with you, my friends, a few testimonies that illustrate this sacred principle, that transformation always begins within consciousness long before the world acknowledges it. These are not extraordinary stories meant to impress the imagination. They are simple accounts of ordinary men and women who discovered that spirit works invisibly first and only later reveals itself in form. Their experiences demonstrate that what appears as delay, what appears as nothing changing, is often the very period in which the deepest spiritual awakening takes place. And once that awakening is established, the outer world yields effortlessly, naturally, without strain. There was a woman who came to these teachings burdened with a physical condition that had troubled her for years. She prayed fervently for healing, tried every treatment, sought every remedy, and yet the condition persisted. When she came to the practice of the presence, she still hoped for a sudden miracle, but instead of immediate relief, she found only a quiet, increasing peace, a softening of fear, a loosening of anxiety, a sense that she was no longer fighting for control. For weeks, her body did not change, but her consciousness did. A stillness she had never known began to rise within her. The fear that had once consumed her subsided, and only after this inner peace became established did the outer symptoms begin to dissolve slowly, then steadily, until the condition simply faded away. The healing did not come because she mastered a technique. It came because the consciousness that had sustained the illness was replaced by the consciousness of truth. The outer healing was merely the final echo of an inner transformation. Another student, a businessman, endured a financial collapse that threatened to dismantle all he had built. For months, nothing he attempted succeeded. Every effort to repair the situation seemed to deepen the crisis. When he turned to the spiritual path, he expected supply to manifest quickly, but his outer world remained unchanged. What did change was the fear that had ruled him in meditation. The frantic grasping dissolved in stillness. The belief that his security depended on external circumstances evaporated. And then, in that quiet space of surrender, new ideas began to flow, ideas he could not have conceived while his mind was clouded with anxiety. Fresh opportunities appeared, not through striving, but through intuition. And as his consciousness shifted from fear to trust, from dependence on the world to dependence on spirit, his business gradually stabilized and then flourished. The transformation did not begin in the financial arena. It began in the silent realization of infinite spiritual substance. And then there was the mother who suffered from an estranged relationship with her daughter. For years she attempted to fix the situation, conversations, explanations, apologies, interventions. Yet nothing changed. Only when she turned inward and realized that harmony cannot be forced upon another, only recognized within one's own consciousness, did the path begin to open. She stopped asking for the relationship to mend. She stopped trying to change her daughter. Instead, she recognized the divine presence within her own heart and held the quiet knowing that the same presence lived within her daughter as well. She did nothing outwardly, no new attempts, no pressure, no strategies, but inwardly something shifted. The bitterness dissolved. The fear softened. She no longer approached the situation from longing or pain, but from peace. And months later, without warning and without effort, the daughter reached out, first cautiously, then warmly. What was restored between them was not the product of human manipulation, but the manifestation of a consciousness that had come to know harmony within itself. These testimonies share one truth. The outer demonstration always comes after the inner awakening. The healing did not cause the peace. Peace made healing inevitable. The financial breakthrough did not dissolve the fear. The dissolution of fear made the breakthrough possible. The relationship did not bring harmony. The mother's recognition of inner harmony allowed the relationship to be restored. If you can truly grasp this, my friends, your entire approach to the spiritual path will change. You will stop measuring progress by the calendar. You will stop judging your practice by results. You will understand that the invisible work is the real work. And when that work is complete, The outer demonstration will come not because you forced it, not because you deserved it, but because consciousness has ripened and the world must reflect that ripeness. And now, my friends, we come to a truth that marks the threshold between childhood religion and mature spirituality, between seeking results and awakening to reality. It is the understanding that true faithfulness has nothing to do with bargaining, pleading, or performing in hopes of a reward. Many begin the spiritual path believing, even if unconsciously, that their devotion should earn them something: healing, supply, harmony, guidance, protection. And when these do not appear on their preferred timetable, they feel betrayed, as if the universe has violated some sacred contract. But Joel Goldsmith taught that God does not dispense blessings as compensation for spiritual effort. God does not respond to our practice by altering external conditions. God is the blessing, the presence, the life, the very essence of being itself. And mature spirituality is the shift from seeking something from God to seeking the realization of God. In this maturity, you no longer meditate to fix a problem. You meditate to remember the truth of your being. You no longer practice the presence to attract supply. You practice because the presence is already your sufficiency. You no longer pray for harmony in relationships. You pray because the recognition of oneness is your natural state. You no longer turn within to escape pain. You turn within because that is where reality is. And in this shift, the entire premise of your spiritual life transforms. You stop using spirit as a means to an end, and you allow spirit to be the end itself. You stop measuring your progress by how quickly outer conditions improve, and begin measuring it by the increasing depth of peace, the stability of your inner stillness, the gentleness with which you meet difficulties, the absence of fear even in the presence of uncertainty. This is spiritual adulthood, the stage where you cease trying to manipulate appearances, cease running after demonstrations, cease attempting to bend the world to your spiritual understanding. Instead, you rest in the quiet recognition that God is already present, already complete, already expressing itself as the life you live. You realize that your work is not to change the world, but to behold it through the eyes of awakened consciousness. And when this shift takes place, something miraculous yet entirely natural begins to happen. Outer harmony appears without effort. Supply flows without fear. Relationships heal without manipulation. Solutions emerge without strain. But now these are not signs that your practice worked. They are the fruits of a consciousness that is no longer seeking outward improvement, but resting in inward truth. Mature spirituality means that you are faithful to the practice, not because it produces results, but because it reveals God. You remain faithful through silence, through delay, through darkness, through confusion, not because you hope that persistence will earn you relief, but because you have discovered that life without the awareness of God is no life at all. And in that discovery, you find an inner freedom so profound that the conditions of the outer world lose their power to terrify you. The ups and downs of experience no longer shake you. The shifting shadows of human existence no longer tempt you into fear or desperation. You begin to walk the world as one who knows that the kingdom of heaven is within, that God is the life of your being, that nothing can separate you from the infinite except your own forgetfulness. It is here, in this maturity, that the true peace of the spiritual life dawns, a peace that does not depend on circumstances, a peace that does not rise and fall with the tides of fortune, a peace that cannot be taken away because it is not given by the world. This peace is the sign of awakening. And once this peace is established, the soul no longer bargains with God, no longer pleads for signs, no longer seeks external guarantees. It simply rests quietly, steadily, trustingly in the truth that has always been the truth. It has finally allowed itself to remember. And so, my friends, as we bring this class to a close, let us return to the central assurance that underlies everything we have explored together. Your faith has not been wasted. Not a single moment of turning within has been lost. Not one prayer, not one breath of recognition, not one attempt to rest in spirit has been in vain. Even when the outer world remained unmoved, something within you was being reshaped, refined, and awakened. You may have believed that nothing was happening, but spirit was quietly deepening your roots, clearing old fears, dissolving ancient patterns, and preparing your consciousness to behold the truth you were not yet able to receive. What you call delay was often divine protection. What you call silence was the still, gentle activity of God. What you call nothing changing was the very foundation of change, being laid within the hidden temple of your awareness. You must understand that the spiritual path is never a journey of earning God's favor or proving your devotion. It is always and only a journey of awakening to what has already been true from the beginning. And so every act of faithfulness, every time you return to the inner presence when fear tried to carry you away, every time you sat in stillness when anxiety demanded action, every time you recognized the truth instead of begging for relief, each of these moments carved a deeper channel in consciousness through which the light of spirit could flow. These were not small efforts. They were sacred openings. They were the slow dawning of the kingdom within. Let the mind be at peace now. Release the belief that God has overlooked you or withheld something from you. God withholds nothing. God is fullness itself, forever pouring itself into every receptive consciousness. And you, through your practice, through your sincerity, through your perseverance, have been becoming increasingly receptive even if you did not realize it. Your faith was not an attempt to persuade God. It was the gradual unveiling of God already present. And as this unveiling continues, you will find that outer conditions naturally rise to meet the new consciousness you have cultivated, not as dramatic miracles, not as sudden magic, but as the quiet, steady reflection of the inner truth finally recognized. And so I bless you with this remembrance. You are standing this very moment in the presence of God, in the kingdom of heaven, in the fullness of infinite spirit, not tomorrow, not when the demonstration appears, not when the circumstances shift now. This is the truth. Your faithfulness has been preparing you to see, and if you will continue, gently, patiently, without bargaining, without striving, simply recognizing day by day the presence that is your very life, you will discover that the peace you have sought is already within you, the wholeness you have prayed for is already yours, and the harmony you long for has never been absent. It has only awaited your recognition. Your faith was not wasted. It was the bridge that brought you to this moment, this awareness, this unveiling. Walk forward now, not in hope alone, but in the quiet assurance that God is not coming to you. God is expressing itself as you. And as this truth becomes the center of your consciousness, everything in your life will begin to align with it naturally, gently, and in perfect time. Peace be with you. My friends, The kingdom is within.